Welcome everyone once again on our session on weaving the compliance fabric into the business. So we have with us today Rose Chapman, who is the Global Head of Compliance and Ethics at Travelport Inc. And in her Rose is responsible for enterprise-wide development, management, and delivery of global compliance and ethics policies, processes, and training, as well as carrying out investigations. Her collaborative style encourages engagement with governance functions and the business across the Americas, Europe, and the Middle East and Asia Pacific to ensure consistent application of the Code of Business Conduct and Ethics. Until February 2013, Rose was Chief Compliance Officer and Money Laundering Reporting Officer of Towers Watson Capital Markets Limited and traveled extensively as Global Regulatory Compliance Manager for entities in the Towers Watson Corporate Group. Rose also lectures for the International Compliance Association and is a committee member of the UK Institute of Money Laundering Prevention Officers. She holds a Master of Laws in International Corporate Governance, Financial Regulation, and Economic Law, gained at the University of London's Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. She also has various postgraduate qualifications, including Management Studies from Middlesex University and Diploma in Anti-Money Laundering and Financial Services Regulatory Compliance from the International Compliance Association. We are very happy to have you with us, Rose, and over to you.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to attend this session today. I shall be talking this morning about weaving compliance into the fabric of the business. I'm sure it's something that we're all very familiar with trying to do, and I hope that I'll bring some new thoughts to you during my talk this morning. If you do have any questions at all whilst I'm speaking, please do raise your hand. I'll be happy to take questions throughout the presentation. Oh, thank you. Okay. So, Travelport then. What is Travelport? What does it do? Basically, I work now for a tech company that serves the travel industry. We have technical solutions such as applications to help you find your way around airports, booking tools, so that if you're going on a flight, you can book via our global distribution service. We have payment services providers all around the travel industry. We are crucially headquartered in Langley, but listed on the US New York Stock Exchange. So that means I've got SOX compliance to contend with, as well as the UK corporate compliance also. We are a global company. So everything that I do, very small team, is geared around a global solution, and we have local policies, etc., that cover things locally. So I think we've had a pretty long introduction for myself. Thank you very much. So I won't go into this now. The basis of my presentation today is something that is actually written into my book, flyers for which are on the tables. I was commissioned by Kogan Page to write a book on anti-money laundering. Why they chose me, I don't know, but they did. And it's enabled me to articulate a strategy wheel that I do use and have used over the years and have developed over the years. And it's been a really useful tool for me to articulate what it is that I do, how that I do it, and why I believe that evolutionary change rather than revolutionary change is the way to go. So the agenda then. The agenda revolves around the anti-money laundering and compliance strategy wheel as I see it. Doesn't go into risk assessments. The risk assessments will take place, of course they will, and will be informed by and will take information from the strategy wheel and the output from that. And always what I'm looking to do throughout all of the activities that I undertake in compliance and anti-money laundering and indeed modern slavery and data protection, because I have to deal with all of those within my role, is to reach a virtuous spiral. So it's an upward spiral, and that's what the purpose is of all of the elements. So very simply, this is what it looks like. Different elements, 10 in all, grouped together in twos to form a strategy wheel of 5. So the policy and training I shall start with at the top. What's our policies? Do we train them? Do the policies mean anything? Are they words? if we see a policy of the company, do we say, policy, what do we do? Or do we actually say, this is the policy, this is agreed with our business leaders, signed off by the CEO or the general counsel, or whomsoever is taking the responsibility? Is it real? Do we train it out? How do we make people aware? How do we get their commitment to actually following what it is that we want them to do? How do we organise that behaviour? How do we build and drive the cultural change that really all the businesses, all the organisations I've ever worked for have needed to achieve compliance in the different areas? How do we prevent things from going on wrong? And how do we detect if they are going wrong? What do we do about that? And whistleblowing and investigation. I deal with these, I head this up for the company, and I find them very, very interesting, because out of things that go wrong in the company, out of reports that come in from disaffected people, folks who are really stressed out by reading something in the policy that they should be doing, finding others doing it wrong, what happens? How do we actually take that forward? Do we drive the cultural change via the whistleblowing hotline? That's the challenge for everyone. That's what I always try to do. And then monitoring and review. Last but not least, what does our monitoring look like? What do the reviews actually look like? Are they real reviews? Do they drive us forward? So that's a fairly simple start. Fairly bland, I think, to start off with. However, once we move into it, it's very challenging for companies to write policies. Still, I believe it is. I've been saying this, thinking this for 20 years probably, or developing the thought over 20 years. You'll find policies that are written for many companies that are still provided by external counsel. There are blanket policies. What did you need? Is it anti-bribery and corruption? Oh, yes, we can send that over. All you need to do is to put your company name into that policy. Well, they're going to be lawyer speak. They're not going to be geared for your company. When your employees read them, they're going to switch right off. So the first thing to do, and what I've done at my current company, is to take what I consider to be the bland lawyer speak policies, go through them one by one and create them for the company. And the rewriting for some of them has been enormous. And getting people, the business leaders, to sign them off, to consider them, to build them into the structure of their organisation, and actually to use them is part of that challenge, of course. Because what we're trying to do is to provide employees with a framework. People, in my experience, people are not naturally delinquent, not naturally tending to wish to be delinquent. However, delinquency occurs more and more the less you guide people. Natural tendencies will take over. Oh, you haven't told me what to do about that, so I shall do it my way. So then you have anarchy and chaos, and you have to bring it back together again. So providing employees with a practical framework for their activities is actually, to me, all part of what the policy brings. And of course, we do have to attend to those who actually do wish to not follow policies, just to do their own thing. And having consistent, actually relevant policies, along, of course, with their application, allows us to provide disciplinary action and corrective action for when we find that policy breaches have occurred. Okay, so achieving policy relevance then. I've talked a lot about it already, but let's see what we can pick up from here. Revision cycles. How many companies will sign off a policy and then think, good, it's done. I don't have to do that again for the next, 5 years is it, 6 years is it? Let's not visit there again. And they don't visit it again, and gradually the policy becomes, it's older, it looks less relevant. I actually have instituted a 3-year policy cycle at the company in which I work now. 3 years is quite a long time. But everything is updated within those 3 years. I have one policy which is updated quarterly. So not all policies are going to the 3 years, but everything is updated within the 3-year cycle. And I have instituted this also for our subsidiaries. So everything comes back. I have a massive control document, which is now housed in a SharePoint online with reminders, etc., to very simply done, of course, but it is there and it works. So we need to make sure that people do think when they read them, the policies are relevant. Are they clear? What sort of language is used? Will people, lay people, understand what you're trying to say within this policy, or won't they? Because if they don't understand it, loads of people in my organisation do not have English as a first language. So if it's intelligible to a person who speaks English, then that's one thing. Is it clear enough, consistent across the policies enough to get the principles out there to people who actually have to have this stuff delivered, maybe via a manager in their own language? That's a question for a policy that if you're working in a single country, you don't really have to think about. But when you're working globally, you really do. And I think it's a very good discipline to ensure that you are thinking about the clarity of the policies when you write them and implement them. Dealing with non-adherence to policies. Does your company have a level of employee above which the policies do not appear to apply? What happens in the C-suite? Do those people actually in the C-suite, do they just take time out? Perhaps they've got other interests elsewhere. Do they book their holidays? Do they take time out? Do they do things that is said to be discouraged by the company? What are we doing about that? Is there a challenge to the C-suite? And that's something that every compliance officer needs to think about, because consistency across the application of your policies is really crucial to gaining the respect of employees and driving a cultural change that you need to ensure the behaviours are correct within your firm. Oh, yeah. And if the day-to-day activity of a policy and the policy are divergent, you need to get them back together again. Either the policy needs to change or the activity needs to change. And that will be worked out in collaboration in the best instance with your business partners, with legal, and with everyone who is affected by that policy and that activity, because otherwise you won't get it implemented. Alignment's essential. Also, I do operate a single policy view. If we've got anti-bribery and corruption policy, that's the policy. I have transferring employees all over the world all the time. So if I have a policy for South Africa that is different from that in Mexico, then the person from Mexico moving to South Africa won't know what they're doing. That's my approach anyway. Keep it simple, keep it easy to understand. Then should there be changes required by law, different jurisdictions have that policy underneath it so that it applies in that jurisdiction, but not take one out and put in another. Training then. This to me is if you've got the warps and wefts, if you've got the downwards pieces of your weaving and you're now weaving through to make a fabric for your culture, this is what you need. You need training. Are there any money laundering reporting officers in the room? Yay. Then you will understand the necessity of logging the training and getting the training definitely delivered on that day. There are disciplines within regulatory companies where the person who is responsible for anti-money laundering, for instance, is actually totally responsible for that within the company. If that person doesn't receive training themselves, tough, you should have done that because you're the MLRO. However, if that MLRO, money laundering reporting officer, does not train the people in the company, they are guilty, they are negligent, and the responsibility lies with them. So I think that having been an MLRO myself, it's given me a whole new concept of proving that your training has happened. But as regulations in all sorts of areas become more stringent, and as auditable records of training are now part of everyday life. When did you put this training out, Rose? Who took it? Were they delinquent? Were they overdue? I'm asked these questions all the time now. Fortunately, I have got it sorted. So for me, generic training is not the way forward. It's easy. You know it's been signed off by the lawyers. You know that it's good for anti-money laundering regs or data protection or modern slavery. You know that it's good in a general way for that. But does it talk to your people? I prefer to write training and then get it signed off. My training, get that signed off, amended, reviewed by external counsel. Because I know why I wrote that training and I know it's relevant for my company. External counsel can tell me if I'm barking up the wrong tree, if I've got this piece wrong or that piece needs amending. But they can't provide me, if they write the training, with the thought process around which I produced it. So if you really know why you've trained this out, what you were trying to achieve in it, and can, are brave enough basically to put it forward, to get it reviewed, I think you're in a different place with your training. That's something I've always aspired to. And just recently, in actual fact, we have bought some extremely good, very basic software that enables my compliance people to put our training into online training, SCORM compliant, trackable within the department. And that's the way forward for me. It's pretty basic, it works. So testing. The training and testing provides a level of competence. Do you know that all your people have received your message for GDPR? Very, very topical at the moment, of course. Do you know that on that date they knew what it was they were supposed to be doing? Yes or no? If the answer to that question is yes, and you have it, the data to prove that the training was completed and the test passed, you've got it. If you're actually sitting in a room, as we are now, and I'm talking to everyone here, and at the end of this presentation, you say, oh, well, yeah, it's interesting, but, I did like the sweets on the table, and the sweets on the table are more important than actually the training, then you failed with your training. And people who do things wrong and are getting the company into trouble, they will take that sort of approach. So, face-to-face training, in my mind, this is far better than anything else. When I do investigations, if I know that within the people in the room, within the employees in this office, we have perhaps a competition law breach, I will have senior management with me and I will present. I won't be doing any pointing fingers or saying any names or anything like that, and I can draw out the people who are doing it wrong just because of the way that they react. In one presentation that I delivered in Italy, I literally had the guilty parties clinging on to the back of the chair in front of them. I thought, wow, I wish I'd had that on film. But, you really can make an impact. Face-to-face training is very, very good. So it's definitely got a place. But for everyday training, where you need to know that your employees are doing the right thing, and you know that you've woven that piece of information into their behavioural activity, hopefully, then you need to have proof. I expect that a number of you in the room are familiar with the Morgan Stanley example that I'm about to tell you about, but some years ago now, there was a Morgan Stanley employee, Garth Peterson, working in China, and he was actually bribing government official in China to get some really good real estate deals, and he did. Very, very successful. And over about 5 or 6 years, this Garth Peterson continued to bribe this guy. Anyway, it came out. There was a report, it came out. And the Department of Justice were at the door of Morgan Stanley saying, your compliance controls are weak. Okay, what are you doing? Let's see what you've been doing. Well, the compliance department were able to show that their policies were updated regularly, that they were relevant to what they were trying to do. They regularly communicated policy reminders to the employees. I think within the 5 or 6 year period, it was over 30 times. That is lots. But of course, it was with a good purpose. And they did impose stringent controls on payments, which is something that we all need to do. Petty cash, etc. How is all that controlled? One needs to be very, very stringent these days. And they conducted due diligence. Well, that's great. So Garth Peterson then, really upset to lose some real estate in China. I expect most upset of all to be incarcerated in a US jail for a bit. But when the DOJ had finished, Department of Justice had finished with the whole case, they handed the file over to the Chinese authorities, who found the government official guilty and sentenced him to death. Now, I never followed up to see if they actually killed him or not. But this, to me, is the perfect example of why we need to have stringent controls, which we are confident in and we know that they work in our companies. Because that compliance officer and the team must have been really made up, as in being absolutely hot property. I should think that they were so able to get any role that they wanted in transforming a compliance department to have achieved that, because that's very, very good compliance controls to enable that result. And nobody wants to be in a position where their own activities has actually resulted in somebody being sentenced to death. But that is the way that the law works in the different countries around the world, of course. So then, awareness and commitment. How does that change from the policies and training? Well, awareness is a lighter touch. How do we get awareness in the way that we want it to be given to our employees? The tone from the top, of course, CEO messages, they can be overdone. But I've always found that with the backing of a good CEO, a solid CEO, that really respects the compliance and ethics of the company, then actually you're on a winner, and use them carefully. So our CEO, for instance, it does the introduction and conclusion to our code training and always is very, very hot on that subject. It's almost the only thing that he would do to all employees all year from a compliance perspective, pure compliance perspective. But it works, and he's always consistent and very strong on the topic. Intranet Announcements. They're great. They just pop up, news announcements, perhaps on the home page of your intranet. There they are. They pop up. Emails, I have really moved away from using. And I don't know how the emails work in your organisations, but what can happen is if you send emails to employees and they're not a call to action, the third time, third time, wherever the parameter is set, that they don't read it, the fourth one goes into their clutter box, not important, or other box, whichever, doesn't come into their actual email box. So you lose that immediacy. I only send out emails now to employees where there's a call to action, so that they have to do something. They know they do when they see it coming through. They've got to do something, and it keeps that fresh. But that's changed over the years. I used to like emails, but for communication, not so much now. So, consistent information then to employees. Really, a communications plan is very important. I've struggled in consecutive companies to actually get into the communications plan of the organisation, because they want to do the commercial things, they want to do other things around it, and compliance is seen to be something that should be happening anyway. So why is it so hot for communications? But I've done it now. So I have a quarterly plan at the moment. So all employees quarterly is the way that I want to make sure that I've got it. And that's not just to be slavish over the timescale, it's to ensure that I can save things up and pop them out at relevant times. We do want to raise awareness. All of us, I think, in compliance need to raise awareness. I think that investigations help with this, actually, which I shall come on to later. But if people are aware of what they're doing, that what they're doing matters and that we are in compliance looking at it, they will think, oh, well, perhaps that does matter, and maybe this should happen or that should happen, and things will flush out. If ever you've done a monitoring review, starting a new monitoring review, I think it's always the case, at least in my experience, where the first time you monitor something or review something when no attention has been given to it before, it's rubbish. You just don't get a good result. Once that organisation or that area knows that you'll be coming back in 12 months and you'll be looking at the same thing again, it's better. So initial review, maybe not so, but they become more aware and they become more committed to it because they know that your commitment is there. So that's worth thinking about. Also, I have actually, the feedback on the policies at my current organisation has been great. They like to see refreshed policies. They like to have the confidence that when they are acting upon something that the company requires, that it is still relevant. And so I get feedback on the policy reviews when they are really timely carried out, so which is good. And annual certification to policies and procedures is a huge piece of the commitment, of course, for employees and for our knowledge that employees are committed. So this is just an extract from the book, actually. And it's an AML communications campaign strategy, but you could just take the AML off it and put, communications campaign. So what I always ask is, what am I trying to do? Who's it going to? Who's giving this out? And how am I going to do it? And I want to mix that up so that it remains fresh and it doesn't become stale to employees. So the first line would be an introduction, fairly high level, from the CEO. CEO is always going to be the celebrity winner. As I like to say, who's going to get the kudos for it? Have a celebrity winner. I send stuff out on behalf of commercial sales. I prepare it, I do the training for it, I do the communications for it, and then I don't send it out. I don't want to be the celebrity winner. I want my commercial people to be the celebrity winners. I want people who are actually in the direct management of the employees who are taking the training to be the celebrity winners, because then those employees will take more notice. And as you go down, there's more level of detail as we come through, controls for departments, introducing procedural controls, and then the detailed controls, the allocation of responsibilities, and then what are you doing with the data. So prevention and detection then. Treating risks and detecting risks as they occur. Don't we all wish we could do this more efficiently? Being there immediately when a risk is occurring and detecting it and being able to prevent bad things happening because of our detection. Well, the more you have trained, aware people who are committed to the compliance of the company, that's where you're going to get your prevention and detection kicking in more efficiently. You need allies. And in amongst all of this, here we go, partner with the business. I think if you're in a corporate governance role, such as this, then you need to know your business. When you go out to your business people and are asking them to implement controls, you need them to know that you understand the pressures on their part of the business. Then they will listen to you. And if you listen to them and build their concerns, their requirements into something that you are doing, then they will know that you're a business partner, but it takes two to tango. We can't just from compliance just be giving out directives the whole time. We need to learn from the business. What do you need from me? How can I help you to achieve this? Now I could dovetail that into what I'm doing with whichever policy and training it is, and help them get that out. Keeping up to date with new products and services as well as laws and regulations. This is how I started out in my compliance career. Compliance developments. I wish I had a compliance developments team now. Horizon scanning as their working out what the new regulations can do for the firm. And this is what we all need to do, perhaps, unless we have someone or a small team who can help us to do this. What is out there? Regulation isn't necessarily all bad. It provides opportunities too. And we want to be ahead of the curve. I want to be able to go to my CEO when he says, "Oh, Rose, we need to do this." Anti-bribery training for the UK Bribery Act springs to my mind. I'd already done it. I'd already got that training in place, and I could present it to him and do it. Now, people like that. Senior management like that, if you can get ahead. So that's, to me, really, really important. And also, liaising with colleagues in other governance functions. Internal audit, always a good ally, always a good ally. And cybersecurity, more and more now. Cybersecurity has tended to be, in my experience, quite distant, probably from most of the other governance functions, but not anymore, especially with GDPR. And detecting unusual patterns of activity, having that forum in which one can discuss that confidentially and find out what is happening, how are we going to prevent it, or how are we going to control that risk. Really, really important. And it's all, to me, it's all about collaboration and alignment with other governance functions. So whistleblowing and investigation then. Does anybody here run a hotline? Yes. Ooh, not many, but yeah. Whistleblowing hotlines are a challenge. And keeping information from the whistleblowing hotline confidential is also a huge challenge. I've had scenarios where a person has been out in a social scene, as it were. They're going to a conference and they're all working at the conference, and one person was trying to get money out of the company by introducing family members to the costs of the event. And it took one of those people to blow the whistle to actually raise the awareness to me. I got internal audit involved. We could see that actually his behaviour was going on for a while. But how to protect that person who has actually blown the whistle. And the way that I did that, and it really takes thought, I think, this sort of thing, was to deal with it as a quarterly internal audit investigation which had given rise to this, this piece of information coming out. Now that's a very simple example, but where you have small teams, perhaps you've got one person in Chile or something like that. You know, if you've got very, very small teams, or there's going to be a focus on where that information came from, you really have to protect the confidentiality and the anonymity of the person reporting. Otherwise, if it gets out and that person is really embarrassed, or people are all talking about him or her, no one will come to you again. No one will report.
What if the CEO wants to know who blew the whistle?
If the CEO wanted to know who blew the whistle, I wouldn't just go and say it was so-and-so in the first instance. I'm really, really careful about this. He has never asked me, and we have had conversations of this nature. So that's a respect between him and me, I think. I've had a scenario where we had a person who was totally defrauding the company, very senior person, and this was eventually it was known, but at the time, well, nobody knows in the business now who blew the whistle. There's only me who knows that.
You know the Barclays thing, though, don't you? Jez Staley in that story. That's a very uncomfortable position, I presume, for the compliance officer to be in when it's the CEO who's really breathing down his neck.
Yeah, I mean, and it is, and you could get fired for it, though. I mean, you can get fired for, going against what your CEO would say, but I've never been in that position, I have to say. But if that were to be, of just thinking, how would I deal with that? I wouldn't give the information.
I don't know the full story, you probably know it better than I do, but he had two goes at getting the, I'm sorry, he had...
Is it on? Yeah.
No. Yeah, I think he had two goes at getting the information, and I think he didn't get it. I think the whole system actually works. Hello? I think the whole system actually works.
Yes. No, it's vital. It is vital not to be bullied. That is true. In fact, I really do believe in that, and I have been in situations where my health has suffered for it. I ended up in a Harefield Heart Hospital with stress because the pressure upon me to divulge information was so great, and I knew if I let that information go, I would never respect myself anymore, and I would have let people down, and I wouldn't do it. And of course, it all worked out. I didn't let the information go, and I just taught myself to be a little bit stronger and have a little bit thicker rhino hide. But you do need rhino hide to survive some of these things, and it was a learning curve for me at the time.
You shouldn't be sacrificing your health for that sort of thing. It's just a job.
Well, you see, now is different. Thank you. Okay, so this is something that actually has just cropped up. Addressing unconscious bias in the investigations team and in senior management. Respect for the reporter can sometimes be as challenging as respecting the confidentiality of a reporter. So is the reporter a junior member of staff? Is he or she quite junior? It perhaps doesn't happen in every culture, but are the social connections and the professional connections of senior people more important to the senior people than the evidence that's before them? We have to be very, very open-minded as compliance officers dealing with investigations, whistleblowing and investigations, to actually see whether the reporter is reporting accurately and not be biased by any pressures from above that we may have. Because at the end of the day, those who are, socialising together and they are perhaps collaborating very much in the business together may be blinded slightly, not deliberate, but, quite undeliberate, but may be blinded slightly by the truth of something that's before them. When you have maybe a reporter who you don't respect for whatever reason. Perhaps they're junior, perhaps they're the wrong gender, perhaps there's all sorts of ways that you can disrespect people. But actually knowing that and addressing this unconscious bias is something that also takes time, and in my experience actually takes external people to assist in keeping everything objective and even. And that's something that I learned from my earlier experience. External counsel sometimes can be very helpful when you've got some prejudices within a company or when you've got undue pressures upon you within investigations. Very important for us all to embrace diversity and inclusion. And in a way where it's not included, it is very, very apparent. So consistent recording, reporting of hotline activity. Hotline in my company is not used that often. However, I get personal reports to me directly of all sorts of stuff. And I'm really, really happy about that because people don't hide, or the majority of people don't try to hide behind anonymity because it's been apparent in the company that I will respect the anonymity and the confidentiality of the report. So I think you might think that, oh my goodness, all these people are coming to me and isn't it a pain? Well, I prefer that to actually having the whistleblowing hotline going on an anonymous basis. Both are available I'm just really happy at the moment with the way it's being used. But to have a consistent recording, reporting of hotline activity, I'm audited quarterly. I don't know how it works in your company, but quarterly audits. And each time I have, it's an anonymised system of reporting so that we can track the consistency of output across the bandings. Employee levels are called bandings in the company I work for at the moment. And so the bandings, consistent, are they between a top banding and a lower banding for the same offence? They need to be. Okay, monitoring review then. As I was saying earlier, first time you go in to do a review on a new area, highly unlikely to be a really, really positive review. You need to train people, you need to make them aware, you need to have the commitment yourself to putting time into what they're doing to understand what it is that they need to be doing. Do they know what good looks like? You can help them with their management to, or you may have to actually instruct or guide the management of the area. Who knows? But do you monitor all of your relevant risk areas? That's a very difficult one to answer. You know what you do monitor. Do you know all of your risks? Are you really, really aware of all of the risks that you are subject to in the company? Are there unknown unknowns out there, things you don't know exist yet, which may come up and bite you? It's worth keeping that horizon scanning open, including into the area of monitoring and reviews, because you need to have data on all of your risk areas, and that needs to be auditable. In my view, all of your data needs to get into a consistent flow whereby if you know what you're going to be audited on, or your regular audits, that's first, and then the rest would follow. Also, getting your feedback, monitoring feedback reported. We have a board audit committee, and that's where the compliance auditing goes, monitoring goes. Monitoring resources are definitely linked to policy and procedure reviews, but that can be mapped. You can map each policy into a matrix of activities that you're going to carry out because of that policy with people who are responsible for carrying them out. And that is a lot of work, and I would suggest that you do it in role titles rather than people's names so that it stays more consistent over time and needs less updating, shall we say. And make sure if you have day-to-day activities that are different from your policies, that need to be in a policy or should be covered by the policy, then you've got to make sure that they match up. They've got to be aligned. Don't leave things out. Yeah, and the last one actually here, resource allocation to address risks and issues as they arise. In my experience, dealing with the root cause of issues and taking that time out, the longest one I can think of at the moment was 18 months of a risk that I had identified. There were various issues coming from it. It took me 18 months to get training in place for those particular people and to get the senior management buy-in so to do. And now there are far fewer issues coming in from that area of the business, because people know what they're meant to do and they know folks are interested. So it's carrying out your reviews will bring things up that actually will help you to minimise your risks. So then, going from the really flat, plain blue stuff at the beginning, this is how I see the governance strategy wheel that I work with in my mind when I'm doing my role at Travelport. They're all virtuous spirals. Policy and training. What's the policy say? What's the training? What's new? What needs to go into it? What issues have we had from the whistleblowing hotline? Oh, well, shall we do this? And so your training gets better. So your policies become more relevant. Awareness and commitment, where people didn't know at all before, they know more now. They can build on that awareness. They can become better educated within the business, within their business areas. They can become your eyes and ears. They can report to you or ask you questions, just raise things that you may wish to know. And that's really, really helpful. If you can get people to commit and engage via their awareness and commitment, you're on a winner then. And this is how, with the prevention, detection, the whistleblowing investigation, that's how it all, to me, just spirals round and it just flows. That's how I like to work. And I hope that's been helpful. So, wheels within wheels then. Together, all of that weaves the compliance into the very heart of the company. You can find things out, you can fix them, you've got your business leaders that you're actually collaborating with. People in the business know that if they report, they're safe. People also know that they need to ensure that their area of business runs smoothly. I have people coming to me from different areas, finance, HR, commercial, asking me how to do this better. How can this be done better? Could you help us with this? Would this be a solution to something I'm dealing with? So there's a collaboration. And this alignment, and the alignment with the company strategy and with the goals of the company, if people see that you're engaged and you're relevant to what they're doing, they will become far more engaged with what you're trying to do. And don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Be more careful than I was when I first started off and ended up poorly. You need to get your strategies in place so that you know what you have in place to protect you as well as protect the business, and as well as improve the reputational capacity, as it were, of the company, so that we don't fall down on our reputation, so that we don't do something wrong and don't get caught out by some report that ends up in the newspapers. We all want to avoid that. We all want to avoid that. And that's really the first sort of stepping stone when you're putting the news out as to what am I doing, why does it matter? I'm helping to protect the reputation of this business. What are you doing? Always helps. Okay, and also this is really something I do believe in very much. If you can keep change to an evolutionary pace, not glacial, but to an evolutionary pace, rather than a revolutionary pace, then there's going to be less pushback. And it might mean taking several smaller steps rather than the big step you know you need to take. But to bring the business along with you is far less disruptive. And I know recently the disruptors has been very much a buzzword, but there's disruption that is positive, and there is disruption also which is negative. And if you're going to have a revolutionary change, you need to think first, before implementing it, what effect that is going to have on the productivity of the company as a whole. How will people deal with that? If it's from a compliance and ethics point of view, if it's from a regulatory point of view, if you can start work early and take smaller steps, then you're going to achieve that evolution in a much smoother, more balanced way. Some guy who was a boss general counsel of mine once said to me, "Rose, you are the rising tide of compliance." And I thought, yay! It's what we want to be, isn't it? And just lastly, this is my last slide, okay? So if you're going to produce energy by requiring people to do different things, they're going to do things different. They're going to actually move their behaviour forward. They're going to modify their behaviour. They're going to take on new responsibilities and know how to comply. You're going to provide energy into the company. Now, what you need to know is how to control that energy. And we've all heard of the song, Rock the Boat. Rock the boat, don't rock the boat, baby, yet. When you're sailing, don't know if there's any sailors in the room, when you're sailing, you actually want the boat, especially if you're going upwind, you want it to be on a tilt. You don't want it to be straight and upright and stable. You're not going anywhere. You won't win races if you're just stable and upright and looking pretty in the water. You need to move that boat across. You need to harness the power of the wind. Now, the power of the wind is driving that boat forward. Don't worry about the sea. It's fine. They've got proper clothes on. So that boat's powering into the waves, okay? Every single person on that boat knows what they're doing. They know why they're doing it. They know why they're at that angle to the wind, and they're making that boat go as fast as they possibly can through the waves. That is energizing for success. It's taking control of the energy that is around them and changing it, moving it into a winning formula. It's what we need to be doing in compliance. That's it. Thank you for listening.